Welcome to today's episode, where we dive into the fascinating and unforgettable life of Elizabeth Taylor, a woman whose legacy continues to captivate hearts decades after her passing. Elizabeth Taylor was not just a movie star, she was an icon, a symbol of beauty, talent, and resilience. Born in London in 1932, she would go on to define Hollywood's golden era, starring in some of the most iconic films of the 20th century. But her story isn't just about acting. It's about passion, love, loss, and an extraordinary life lived under the relentless spotlight. Taylor was more than just a pretty face on the silver screen. She was a fierce advocate for the causes she believed in, a savvy businesswoman, and, perhaps most intriguingly, a woman whose personal life, filled with triumphs and scandals alike, was as captivating as any movie she starred in. In this episode, we'll explore the layers of Elizabeth Taylor's life, starting with her early years and moving through her rise to stardom, her iconic roles, her marriages, her philanthropy, and much more. Whether you're already familiar with her story or hearing it for the first time, there's something about Elizabeth Taylor that never fails to fascinate. So sit back, relax, and let's take a journey into the world of a true Hollywood legend. Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor was born on February 27, 1932 in London, England, the daughter of two American expatriates. Her father, Francis Taylor, was an art dealer, and her mother, Sarah, was a former stage actress. Even before she entered the world, the odds seemed to be stacked in her favor, with talent and beauty seemingly written in her very DNA. At just a few months old, Elizabeth and her family relocated to the United States, settling in Los Angeles. Perhaps a sign of fate, as the city would become the backdrop to her remarkable life. Little did anyone know that this infant, with dark eyes and dark hair, would grow up to become one of the most celebrated actresses in film history. It wasn't long before Elizabeth's extraordinary beauty caught the attention of Hollywood. In fact, it happened almost by accident. When Elizabeth was 9 years old, she was spotted by a talent scout while attending a horse auction with her mother. Her mother, Sarah, was a beauty in her own right, and it was Sarah who encouraged Elizabeth to pursue a career in film. At the tender age of 10, Elizabeth signed a contract with Universal Pictures. Her first film appearance was in There's One Born Every Minute in 1942. While this movie was hardly a major success, it marked the beginning of her film career. But it was in 1944, with the film National Velvet, that Elizabeth Taylor truly began to shine. In National Velvet, she played a young girl named Velvet Brown who trained a horse to compete in the Grand National Steeplechase. This role catapulted her into stardom. At just 12 years old, she became a household name, admired not only for her stunning looks but also for her maturity and emotional depth on screen. It was clear that Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just another child star. She was a prodigy in the making. Even though her childhood was consumed by the demands of Hollywood, Elizabeth's family life wasn't always easy. Her parents' marriage was rocky, and they eventually separated, with Elizabeth remaining with her mother. But through it all, her love for acting only grew, and by the time she was a teenager, she had transitioned from child roles into more mature parts, firmly establishing herself as one of the most promising young actresses in the industry. As Elizabeth Taylor blossomed into her teenage years, her career skyrocketed. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, she became one of the most sought-after stars in Hollywood. With her striking violet eyes, raven hair, and timeless beauty, she was a vision on screen. But it was her undeniable talent that truly set her apart. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Elizabeth wasn't content to simply be a pretty face. She demanded to be taken seriously as an actress. One of the defining moments in Elizabeth's career came in 1951 with the release of A Place in the Sun. In this film, she starred opposite Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters in a powerful, dramatic love triangle that would become a classic. Critics were in awe of her performance, praising her ability to convey vulnerability, strength, and longing, all in a single glance. It was clear that Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just another Hollywood starlet, she was an actress who could hold her own with the best of them. But it wasn't just her acting skills that earned her recognition, it was her undeniable screen presence. The camera loved Elizabeth, capturing her in the most intimate moments and making every scene she was in feel charged with energy. In the following year, she continued to build a remarkable body of work, solidifying her place in Hollywood's pantheon. By the mid-50s, Elizabeth was a bona fide star, appearing in films such as Giant, 1956, where she starred alongside James Dean and Rock Hudson. Her portrayal of a fiery and complex character in this film earned her widespread acclaim. But it was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, 1958, that cemented her status as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. Based on Tennessee Williams' play, her role as the conflicted Maggie, whose life is overshadowed by secrets and family dysfunction, was a tour de force. This performance earned her an Academy Award nomination and further elevated her to legendary status. It was during these years that Elizabeth Taylor's name became synonymous with glamour. She was constantly in the public eye, and every new role was met with anticipation. Her star power was undeniable. Yet, despite her professional success, Elizabeth's personal life was far from smooth. She was beginning to realize the pressures of fame and the toll it took on her personal relationships, pressures that would only intensify as her career continued to soar. But no matter what struggles she faced behind the scenes, Elizabeth Taylor's rise to stardom seemed unstoppable. She had the looks, the talent, and the determination to take Hollywood by storm, and by the end of the 50s, she was one of the biggest names in the film industry. By the early 1960s, Elizabeth Taylor had firmly established herself as one of the most iconic actresses of her time. But it was in the early part of that decade that she truly cemented her place in Hollywood history, with a series of unforgettable roles and groundbreaking achievements. In 1963, Elizabeth starred in Cleopatra, a lavish epic that would become one of the most talked about films of all time. The movie, with its enormous budget and spectacular production, made headlines not just for its grandeur, but also for the drama that unfolded behind the scenes. The production was plagued with delays, on-set chaos, and constant changes in direction. But despite it all, Elizabeth's performance as the legendary Queen of Egypt was nothing short of spectacular. However, it wasn't just the film's drama that made Cleopatra so memorable. It was the relationship that blossomed between Elizabeth Taylor and her co-star Richard Burton. Their romance, which began during the filming of Cleopatra, would go on to become one of the most famous love stories in Hollywood history. Their passion, fiery personalities, and multiple marriages to each other and apart captured the public's imagination for years to come. But Cleopatra also marked a turning point in Elizabeth's career. It not only brought her a paycheck that made her the highest paid actress at the time, but also established her as a major force in Hollywood. The 60s were a period of great transformation for Elizabeth, both personally and professionally. Her marriage to Richard Burton in 1964 would dominate the headlines, but Elizabeth was also continuing to make waves in the film industry. In 1966, she starred in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a film adaptation of Edward Albee's play opposite Burton. In this intense drama, Elizabeth portrayed Martha, a bitter, sharp-tongued woman locked in a toxic marriage with her husband George, played by Burton. The film was a critical triumph and one of Elizabeth's most celebrated performances. Her portrayal of Martha earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress, her second Oscar. This victory solidified her as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. But even beyond the accolades, it was Elizabeth Taylor's ability to portray complex, deeply human characters that set her apart. She wasn't afraid to take on challenging roles, and her willingness to dive deep into these characters' emotional and psychological states allowed her to deliver performances that resonated with audiences on a profound level. Her legacy was now firmly established. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just an actress, she was an artist, and the recognition from her peers reflected this. Between Cleopatra and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, she had not only cemented her place as a leading lady of Hollywood, but also proven her versatility and depth as a performer. If Elizabeth Taylor's career was a series of meteoric rises, her personal life was a whirlwind of passion, heartbreak, and intense drama. The spotlight that followed her from the silver screen was rarely far from her personal relationships, and her love life became as legendary as her acting career. Elizabeth's first marriage came at the age of 18 to hotel heir Conrad Nicky Hilton in 1950. The union, however, was short-lived. After just 205 days, they divorced, but this brief marriage marked the beginning of Elizabeth's tumultuous romantic journey. It wasn't long before Elizabeth found love again, this time with British actor Michael Wilding, whom she married in 1952. They had 2 children together, but their marriage also came to an end in 1957. Despite their separation, Elizabeth maintained a friendly relationship with Wilding, and their divorce was amicable. Yet by now, the public was beginning to take notice of Elizabeth's penchant for high-profile marriages, fueling the media's fascination with her personal life. Her third marriage to actor Eddie Fisher in 1959 would be one of the most scandalous and widely publicized in Hollywood history. Fisher was the husband of Elizabeth's close friend, actress Debbie Reynolds, and their marriage shocked the public. The affair that preceded it sent shockwaves through Hollywood, as Elizabeth was both publicly vilified and celebrated for her role in the scandal. Despite the controversy, Elizabeth's marriage to Eddie Fisher was another chapter in her complex and often troubled love life. The union lasted for just 5 years, ending in 1964. It was in the early 60s, however, that Elizabeth's love life would become the stuff of legend. While filming Cleopatra in 1962, she met and fell deeply in love with Richard Burton, one of the most talented and charismatic actors of his generation. Their relationship was fiery, passionate, and at times tumultuous. Their affair began while both were still married to other people, which only added fuel to the tabloid fire. Elizabeth's romance with Burton captured the imagination of the public like no other, and their relationship was marked by multiple marriages and divorces. They were married in March of 1964, only to divorce in 1974 after a decade filled with ups and downs. But even after their divorce, their love for each other remained. Elizabeth and Richard Burton would marry again in 1975, only to divorce once more in 1976. Their love was as intense as it was complicated, an unbreakable bond that defied conventional Hollywood norms. Throughout her life, Elizabeth had a total of 8 marriages, each one as famous as the last, each one scrutinized by the media and the public. While her marriages were often tumultuous, they reflected the depth of her heart and her unrelenting desire to love fully, even if it meant enduring heartache. Elizabeth's personal life was filled with joy, pain, and a sense of longing that was never fully quenched. Despite the ups and downs, she continued to seek connection, and her relationships, both romantic and familial, were a reflection of the powerful woman she was. While Elizabeth Taylor's name became synonymous with beauty and stardom, her legacy was also shaped by her relentless passion for social justice and her advocacy for causes that were deeply personal to her. Throughout her life, Elizabeth didn't just use her fame to bask in luxury, she used it as a platform to champion the causes she believed in. Perhaps one of her most profound legacies is her groundbreaking work in HIV/AIDS advocacy. In the 1980s, when the AIDS epidemic was still largely misunderstood and stigmatized, Elizabeth was one of the first major public figures to speak out about the disease. The media's silence on the issue, coupled with widespread fear, meant that many people with AIDS were ostracized, and the general public was often unaware of the severity of the crisis. In 1984, after the death of her close friend, actor Rock Hudson, who had died from complications related to AIDS, Elizabeth Taylor took action. She founded the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR, and used her position in Hollywood to raise both awareness and much-needed funds for research. Elizabeth was adamant about dispelling the stigma surrounding the disease, and her work was instrumental in securing funding for research and supporting those living with HIV/AIDS. But Elizabeth's activism wasn't limited to just AIDS. She was also deeply committed to the fight for human rights and gender equality. Throughout the years, she publicly supported the civil rights movement and was an outspoken advocate for the LGBTQ+ community, long before it was fashionable for celebrities to align themselves with these causes. Her philanthropy extended beyond just her advocacy work. Elizabeth was also known for her generosity, giving millions of dollars to various charities. She supported children's hospitals, cancer research, and numerous organizations dedicated to helping marginalized communities. Her giving was not always publicized. Many of her donations were made quietly, without fanfare, but it's clear that Elizabeth Taylor felt a deep sense of duty to make a difference in the world. In addition to her charitable work, Elizabeth was a passionate animal rights advocate, and she was known for her love of animals, particularly her cats. Her dedication to causes close to her heart cemented her status as more than just an actress. She was a humanitarian, using her platform to make the world a better place. Even as she aged, Elizabeth remained actively involved in charitable work. She was often described by those who knew her as a woman with a deep sense of compassion, driven by a desire to leave the world better than she found it. And through her tireless efforts, Elizabeth Taylor did just that, leaving a legacy not only of cinematic brilliance, but also of a heart that never stopped giving. While Elizabeth Taylor is most often remembered for her work on screen and her advocacy efforts, she was also an incredibly savvy businesswoman who knew how to leverage her star power to build a lasting personal brand. Her entrepreneurial spirit and keen sense of business allowed her to navigate the shifting tides of Hollywood and turn her fame into lucrative ventures that extended far beyond the film industry. One of her most successful business endeavors was her fragrance line. In the 1980s, Elizabeth launched her signature perfume, White Diamonds, a scent that became one of the best-selling perfumes in the world. The fragrance was a true reflection of Elizabeth herself, elegant, timeless, and undeniably glamorous. The perfume's success was unprecedented, and it helped establish her as not only a beloved star, but also a powerful entrepreneur. Over the years, Elizabeth would release several other fragrances, but White Diamonds remains her most iconic and enduring product, continuing to be a top seller decades later. But Elizabeth's entrepreneurial pursuits didn't stop at perfume. She was also involved in the fashion industry, with her own line of jewelry, clothing, and accessories. Elizabeth was known for her bold, luxurious fashion choices, many of which were influenced by her own impeccable taste and eye for style. She had a deep love for jewelry, particularly diamonds, and her collection was legendary. Her personal collection included some of the most coveted pieces in the world, including the famous Taylor Burton diamond, a 69.42-carat diamond ring given to her by Richard Burton, which became one of the most talked-about gifts in Hollywood history. Elizabeth's personal brand was built around the concept of luxury and glamour, and she used her fame to create products that reflected this image. She knew how to market herself and was unafraid to take risks. Her business ventures were a testament to her ability to think outside the box and capitalize on her status as an icon. Even in her later years, Elizabeth remained active in the business world, often speaking about the importance of maintaining control over one's own image. She was known for her fierce independence, and she managed to maintain a level of personal and professional success that was rare for any star of her era. Her business savvy extended to her role as a cultural ambassador as well. Elizabeth knew how to maintain her relevance in the public eye, even when her acting career slowed down. She understood the power of her name and her ability to create brand partnerships that aligned with her image. This shrewd business acumen only added to her mystique and solidified her as one of the most multifaceted women in Hollywood history. As the years passed and Elizabeth Taylor entered the later stages of her career, her work began to shift, and so did public perception. While she had long been a symbol of glamour, elegance, and emotional depth, the latter part of her life saw her evolve into an even more complex and multifaceted figure. After her iconic roles in films like Cleopatra and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Elizabeth faced the challenge of maintaining her relevance in a rapidly changing Hollywood. The 60s and 70s brought with them new faces, new styles, and new trends, and for a while, it seemed that Elizabeth might be fading into the background. But, true to her resilient nature, she refused to be forgotten. One of the key factors in Elizabeth's continued success was her ability to adapt to different roles. She wasn't afraid to take on characters that were far removed from the glamorous roles of her youth. In the late 60s and 70s, she appeared in a range of films that showed her versatility as an actress. In The Taming of the Shrew, 1967, she played opposite Richard Burton in a comedic yet fiery adaptation of Shakespeare's play. While the film itself received mixed reviews, Elizabeth's dynamic performance was a testament to her continued star power. In the 1980s, Elizabeth embraced the growing trend of television work, appearing in made-for-TV movies and miniseries. One of her most notable TV projects was The Winds of War, 1983, a historical drama based on the novel by Herman Wouk. The series was a huge success, and Elizabeth received a Golden Globe nomination for her portrayal of a matriarch struggling through World War II. It was a different kind of role for her, far removed from the dramatic glamour of her earlier films, but Elizabeth brought the same intensity and emotional complexity to the part, proving that she could still captivate audiences even on the small screen. But it wasn't just her performances that kept the public's attention. Elizabeth Taylor's public image evolved as well. By the time the 1970s and 80s rolled around, Elizabeth had become a living legend, someone who had seen it all and lived to tell the tale. Her personal struggles, including her battles with addiction and her health issues, were widely reported, and yet, rather than tarnishing her image, they seemed to humanize her. Elizabeth's ability to face adversity with strength and grace only increased her allure. Despite the challenges, Elizabeth Taylor never lost her star power. She remained a beloved figure in Hollywood, constantly in the headlines, whether it was for her latest project, her philanthropy, or her high-profile relationships. She was one of the last great movie stars from Hollywood's golden age, and while the industry had changed, her legacy remained unshaken. As the years went on, Elizabeth Taylor embraced her place as a living legend. She no longer needed to chase roles or accolades. Her place in history was already secured. Yet, she continued to work, to give back, and to inspire new generations, always remaining at the forefront of the cultural conversation. As the years wore on, Elizabeth Taylor's life, marked by both extraordinary triumphs and heart-wrenching personal battles, saw another, more private struggle: her health. Despite her seemingly unshakable public persona, Elizabeth's personal life was constantly overshadowed by a series of health challenges that would have broken many lesser individuals, but through it all, her resilience and strength shone brightly, defining her character in a way that few truly understood. Elizabeth Taylor's health issues began to attract attention in the late 1960s when she suffered a number of serious illnesses. She was often in and out of hospitals, enduring various surgeries, some of which were life-threatening. In 1967, she underwent a tracheotomy after a nearly fatal bout with pneumonia, which led to a prolonged period of recovery. Despite the severity of the illness, she bounced back, ever the determined woman, and was back on the screen in no time. But it wasn't just physical health challenges that she faced. Elizabeth's battle with addiction was well documented and, for a time, deeply public. Her struggle with prescription drugs and alcohol was a personal battle that she fought quietly, but the media often picked up on it, turning her private pain into a public spectacle. At one point, Elizabeth checked herself into a rehabilitation center to get the help she so desperately needed. She faced these struggles with the same strength and honesty that had defined her throughout her life. Rather than hide from her demons, Elizabeth spoke openly about her experiences, helping to reduce the stigma around addiction and making it easier for others to seek help. The most public of her health challenges, however, came in the early 21st century, when Elizabeth was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. In her final years, she had to deal with the toll that years of surgeries, illnesses, and the inevitable aging process took on her body. Despite this, Elizabeth remained as spirited as ever, continuing to advocate for causes close to her heart, maintaining her sharp wit, and never allowing herself to be defined by her illness. Her resilience was a key theme of her life. Time and again, Elizabeth Taylor proved that nothing could break her. Whether it was her tumultuous love life, her battles with addiction, or the very real physical challenges she faced, Elizabeth refused to let anything diminish her spirit. Her strength became a part of her public identity, and the world watched in awe as she navigated life's hardships with grace and a relentless will to persevere. Even in the face of illness and old age, Elizabeth never stopped giving. She remained involved in her charitable work, advocating for AIDS research and continuing to use her platform to raise awareness. Her health struggles, while challenging, only enhanced her reputation as one of the most resilient and enduring stars in Hollywood history. Elizabeth Taylor's legacy is a tapestry woven from more than just her dazzling film career and high-profile marriages. It's a story of a woman who defied the expectations of her time, a woman who was as famous for her beauty as she was for her extraordinary courage and heart. And in her final years, Elizabeth Taylor continued to prove that she was a force to be reckoned with, resilient, loving, and ever present in the lives of those who admired her. In the years leading up to her death, Elizabeth's health began to deteriorate further, but she never lost her passion for life or her commitment to the causes she believed in. Even as she faced the physical challenges that came with aging, Elizabeth remained an icon of strength and grace. Her presence at charity events, her outspoken advocacy for HIV/AIDS awareness, and her willingness to be vulnerable in the face of her own struggles ensured that she would remain in the hearts of the public for years to come. On March 23, 2011, Elizabeth Taylor passed away at the age of 79 from congestive heart failure. Her death marked the end of an era in Hollywood, as she was one of the last living stars from the golden age of cinema. In the years following her passing, tributes poured in from around the world, with people from all walks of life remembering her not just as an actress, but as a humanitarian, a philanthropist, and a woman whose courage transcended the silver screen. Her funeral was a reflection of the immense impact she had on the world. Friends, family, and admirers gathered to pay their respects to a woman whose life had been lived in the public eye, but whose soul was far deeper than the headlines ever showed. Richard Burton's daughter, Kate Burton, gave a moving eulogy, remembering Elizabeth's incredible heart and her unwavering love for those she cared about. Her children, Michael Wilding Jr., Christopher Wilding, and Liza Todd, were there as well, speaking of a mother who was much more than the starlet the world knew. She was their mom, and for them, that was everything. Elizabeth's legacy, however, extends far beyond the glamour of her films. It lives in the millions of lives she touched with her charity work, her unrelenting fight for AIDS awareness, and her personal story of overcoming adversity. She changed the way Hollywood thought about women, about beauty, and about strength. She wasn't just a star. She was an icon whose influence is still felt today. Elizabeth Taylor left us with much more than the timeless films she made. She gave us a lesson in resilience, in how to face life's challenges with courage, and in how to love deeply and passionately despite the hardships life throws at you. Her indomitable spirit continues to inspire those who knew her, and those who still learn about her today. She will always be remembered not just for her beauty, but for her heart, her generosity, and her ability to live life with the same intensity with which she acted on the screen. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just a Hollywood legend. She was a woman who lived, loved, and fought with all the passion and fire that she brought to every role. Her legacy, like the diamonds she so adored, remains forever brilliant, enduring, and unforgettable.